Welcome back to today's explainer. For a lot of us, reading feels as natural as breathing. We just do it. But if you really stop and think about it, translating arbitrary symbols on a page into complex living scenes in our minds, that is an incredibly demanding cognitive process. Today, we're going to explore exactly how foundational reading skills are built from the ground up. We're getting under the hood of a very specific educational framework to see how it uses things like structured micronarratives and visual scaffolding to literally transform developing learners into confident readers. So we are analyzing the Florida Best ELA Access Points Level 3 curriculum. And I want us to treat this not just as your standard storybook or some simple workbook, but as a carefully engineered educational tool. Think about that. The vibrant Florida landscapes, the bright oranges, the local wildlife used in the design. It's super inviting for sure. But as we're about to see, absolutely every single element inside this curriculum is a highly calculated step in a structured learning system. Okay, here's our agenda for today. First, an overview of ELA access points. Second, the 5 steps to comprehension. Third, the power of one-sentence stories. Fourth, visualizing context clues. And finally, scaling up to 2 sentences. Let's jump right in. Section 1, ELA Access Points Overview. To kick things off, we really need to understand the ultimate goal of these specific access points for Level 3 students. This isn't just about sounding out words, it's about building the entire architecture of reading comprehension. How does it actually do that? Well, it beautifully merges hyper-condensed text, what we can basically call micronarratives, with incredibly intentional visual design. Together, they create this engaging, solvable puzzle for a developing reader. It completely removes the anxiety of facing a giant, intimidating wall of text and replaces it with manageable, highly targeted learning goals. Section 2, 5 steps to comprehension. Let's see how this sets the rules of the game before a student even reads a single story. There is this really friendly visual anchor used throughout the curriculum. It's a little figure with a star in a speech bubble. It introduces the student instructions for the activities in a very clear, supportive way. Whenever a student sees it, they instantly know, okay, it's time to review our core strategy. And that strategy demands an exact 5-step cognitive process. Step 1, read or listen carefully. Step 2, picture the story in your mind, the who, where, and what. Step 3, answer the questions. Step 5 is just a gentle, encouraging reminder to try your best. But I want you to pay special attention to Step 4, right in the middle there. Use clues. It explicitly tells students to look for context clues to understand what the text means. Keep that in mind, because it's absolutely vital for what we're looking at next. Section 3, the power of one-sentence stories. Put yourselves in the shoes of a foundational reader for a second, as we decode what looks like a super simple micronarrative. Listen to this one. Marcus brought a flashlight to the campsite in case it got dark. Now, as fluent readers, we look at that and think, oh, that's incredibly easy. But for a Level 3 student, that single sentence carries immense weight. It's literally packed with multiple data points. You've got a who, a what, a where, and a why. And all of those require active decoding and memory retention. And here's the really clever part. The curriculum immediately tests that recall through multiple choice questions A, B, and C. It forces the student to map the text right back to the facts. Question 1 asks, what did Marcus bring? A flashlight, a lunchbox, or a sleeping bag? Question 2 asks where he was going, and question 3 tests causal reasoning. Why did he bring it? Was it to read a book, scare animals, or in case it got dark? It acts as a complete top-to-bottom diagnostic of that one single sentence. But wait, it doesn't just stop at basic memory. Every single story wraps up with an open-ended question, like, why do you think Marcus thought it was important to bring a flashlight to the campsite? That completely elevates the cognitive load. It shifts the student from just basic factual recall straight into complex inferential reasoning. The student now has to connect the text to their own real-world knowledge of what a campsite is actually like at night. All right, Section 4, visualizing the context clues. It is absolutely fascinating how the illustrations do just as much heavy lifting as the text itself. Remember Step 4? Use context clues? The curriculum provides a full, rich visual scene right alongside the story, directly mapping out the text we just read. You see Marcus, his flashlight, the tent, the fire. It provides visual learners with immediate, supportive context clues to anchor their understanding. So if they stumble on the word campsite, the drawing of the tent and the campfire serves as a direct visual translation. It's brilliant. And this setup perfectly illustrates how visual information is broken down into distinct multiple-choice options. When answering the questions, students aren't just reading text, options A, B, and C. They're actually looking at them. The workbook forces them to visually differentiate between a flashlight, a lunchbox, and a sleeping bag, or between a campsite, a beach, and a snowy mountain. This basically guarantees that a tricky vocabulary word doesn't become some insurmountable roadblock to demonstrating that they actually comprehend the story. We see this exact same strategy repeated perfectly in the windy porch story. The sentence is, "The wind knocked over the flower pots that were sitting on the porch." And the illustration? It pairs that action-oriented text with crystal-clear cause-and-effect visuals. You can literally see the stylized wind swirling around and the pots falling mid-tumble. It's teaching the abstract concept of wind as an active force, entirely through art. Which brings us to Section 5, scaling up to 2 sentences. Once a student completely masters that single sentence and learns how to use those context clues, the curriculum intentionally turns up the dial on complexity. When we compare a 1-sentence story right next to a 2-sentence story, we can clearly see how the cognitive load jumps. In a 1-sentence story, you just have a single snapshot in time. But in a 2-sentence story, the student is now required to track subjects and actions across a longer chronological sequence. They physically have to hold the first idea in their working memory while they process the second one. Let's use the birthday cake story to see this in action. The story tells us Ella baked a cake for her grandmother, added sprinkles, and wrote "Happy Birthday" on top. It becomes pretty obvious that the student must now synthesize details from multiple clauses to find the correct multiple-choice answers. They've got to remember the item baked, exactly who it was for, and the specific text written in the icing. For a developing reader, that is a massive leap in processing power. So, as we've seen throughout this explainer, none of this is just arbitrary reading practice. Whether it's a 1-sentence story about Jenna carefully painting her cat on a windowsill, or a scaled-up 2-sentence story about a class building a team tower out of blocks and clapping when it's done, the text and the images function together as one cohesive unit. They form an incredibly tight, calculated scaffolding system designed to build genuine cognitive endurance and critical thinking. But this leaves us with a really fascinating question to ponder. As these learners level up from 1 sentence to 2 to full-blown paragraphs, the safety net of those visual context clues is naturally going to have to change. So, as reading materials scale in complexity, how do we ensure that visual scaffolding evolves right alongside the text, pushing readers to rely more on their own imagination while still keeping them engaged and supported? It's a huge question for the future of curriculum design. Thank you so much for exploring this framework with me today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you in the next explainer.